Hello, everyone, and welcome to Community Cleric. I am Sarah. Oh, the captions always snitches on my countdown. Oh, what a pain. But you know what? That pain is countered by the fact that I am here with somebody who I have come to consider my found family, and I don't throw that term around lightly. I don't know really that I've ever used it before on Community Cleric, but it is certainly true for this amazing human who is my little sister in a lot of beautiful ways. And so I am here. Hey, Sean. Sean's in the chat. I don't get to see Sean enough. Sean made our theme music for Girls Run These Worlds, for Community Cleric, for Rangers of the North, for Regency Remixed. Sean made a ton of our music. So it's exclamation mark music. It's not Sean, sorry. And so, hi, Sean. But I am here with Angie. I call her Angie. Please be aware that her name is actually Angela. I have very special dispensation to use the term of loving endearment. This is Angela. She is an incredible storyteller, creator, prolific writer, poet, musician, deep thinker, kind, and I think one of my very first experiences with Angie, and I think it sums up where the rest of my relationship went with Angie, has come to this point, is Angie had no good reason to trust that Girls Run These Worlds was going to be a safe place. And there's a lot that goes into that, that I hope that we'll get the chance to talk about tonight. But she kind of gave it a chance. And then when she found something that wasn't perfect, that wasn't great, that wasn't ideal, it wasn't bad, it just could be improved upon, and she braved the chance of speaking out about it, and she messaged me and she said, hey, I think we should do something about this. And we started months and months of deep conversation. I think even up until we're still changing language around how we identify. Our most current language is people who identify with intersections of womanhood instead of women, or women identifying, or femme identifying. And Angie has been there through every step of that process. If you have seen language change, almost assuredly Angie has been a part of that conversation, or directly led the action to make us better. And I think that really sums up my general relationship with Angela, but also her role here at Girls Run These Worlds, because among the things that I didn't list, Angela is our creative director at Girls Write These Worlds, and a council member, meaning an owner here at GRTW. And she didn't step into it lightly. And I had to kind of, I didn't really have to talk her into it, but I did offer her two different choices. I said, you could start your own channel and have our full support, or you could come and start a publishing house with me. How hard would that be? We don't have any experience in it, but we can totally do it. And not only that, I think we can publish 7 zines next year. And Angie was like, I'm going to paraphrase the conversation, but Angie was like, sounds good. I see no problems. Let's do that. That's not even remotely close to what happened, but Angie is here with me tonight, and I got the chance to talk quite a bit. Hi, Davda. Welcome into the show. Thanks for coming in. Angie is here tonight, is my guest, my long-awaited guest here on Community Cleric. Angela, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing quite well. I can say without any level of sass or exaggeration, I have been looking forward to this ever since we finally found a slot that worked for me to be on here. I know the kind of enthusiasm for folks tuning in that Sarah brings to pretty much all of her creative endeavors and such, despite on some occasions wondering whether or not, and it's like, I'm not the writer sort of type, works on a lot of our zines and gives such a good like overview of everything. I'm like, when Sarah is deeply committed to something, there's just such an energy and enthusiasm that comes out of her. And I wanted that sort of experience in an interview context because it's so intimate and it's so like just us that it's like there's both the ability to like if we wanted to try and put up walls and like mask and all these other things about like who we wanted to pretend we could be to come off more professional, we could do that. But one, I don't want to do that. And two, there is no real need to do that around Sarah. Sarah's one of those few people who's genuinely earned my trust through just repeated action, continuously being there, and never once stopping being that kind of person who will push, but also at the same time make sure she's already secured like a tether to make sure you're okay. So she'll push you
Listen,
into the deep end and then pull you back out if it's just a little bit too much. It's like,
listen.
you're good. You're
Let me
good.
say that I do pay Angela, but not to say these nice things.
No, I
So
just
I
say these
just,
things.
in full disclaimer, listen.jpg, Jen Burb has it right. Angela, we should say thank you to everybody who's watching and who's here with us tonight. You have been watching Community Cleric for a long time. You've always been in the chat, and I've always appreciated it. Thank you to everybody who's here. And also, I want to, I did this. I've lost my community cleric notes somewhere. And so like my outline of how I run the show is lost. And that is on me, that I shouldn't need a reminder for this, but I used to always start it this way and I need to get back to doing it, which is my name is Sarah and I live in Mi'kma'ki, which is the traditional and unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq people in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I am a treaty person. And I need to acknowledge that right off the bat as a treaty person in Canada. We're doing a lot of hopefully starting to move towards maybe thinking about forming a committee to talk about maybe the right steps. Like we're still a long way from the right things, but we're moving in that general direction. You know what I'm saying?
You're at the undergrad and graduate university level of momentum,
Right?
because the joke that my partner and I used to have about everything related to social issues and like graduate studies and like undergrad universities and institutions was wherever the student populace is, the admin will be about anywhere from 4 to 20 years behind that in terms of
Yeah.
how it actually talks about issues.
I would say that's very true, but also goes to one of the first things that I wanted to talk to you about was
Mhm.
how I'm slowly trying to give you a Pavlovian response to TikToks that you join it. And I've been sending you some of my favorite TikToks, and one of them is um, uh, at Latinos Against Spooky Shit, and
It's one of
he
my favorites.
always he is so funny. If you're not following Latinos Against Spooky Shit, you definitely should. Um,
It's worth it.
it's worth it. And he one of the things that he always does is when he gets around to like he starts by talking about whatever the spooky shit is, and then he says, anyways, hola, representative here, Latinos Against Spooky Shit. And that always just I know that he is a West Coast Latino. Um, in that way that like my cousin sent me, oh god, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, the difference between Texas Latinos and California Latinos.
Oh yeah, yep. I've
For
seen
sure,
this. I've seen this clip.
right?
It's amazing.
And as
It's
California
real.
girls, you and I, growing up
Yep.
not far apart from each other.
No, actually, that is one of those weird coincidences of the world, in that we did not actually grow up really that far away from each other. Like we can reference cities and probably streets as well, and we don't have to make a reference to distance from LA.
Yeah,
That's how you know someone is a SoCal person, if you don't have to reference LA as the starting point of
right.
the conversation.
Right, right, exactly, right? Because sometimes people say, "Oh, where are you from?" And I'd say, "Oh, I'm from San Diego." Actually, what I meant was a place where I most closely associate is about 2 hours north of San Diego, but San Diego is the closest big city, right? But like with you, I can, well, our emergency phrase, we'll just share it with the audience, or at least the one that I've determined for us, is like if I start yelling Pomona, we both know that some shit's about to go down because Pomona
Yep,
definitely means it's some coded language for us.
good language.
Right. Um, Latinos Against Spooky Shit representative. When he says representative, that's how I know he's got to be West Coast because the like with Cesar Chavez and like the movement around organization and union and representation is so embedded. I think. Do you not think? Maybe
I I think it's one of those things where it's like constantly what comes up when I see the differences between different areas is some of it is food. It's why I care about food so much in a lot of different contexts, whether world building or just conversation. Is that I remember reading a book that was talking about Chicana feminism. So feminisms, for those who don't know what the term Chicana refers to, is usually someone identifying with womanhood of Mexican descent, usually of Mexican origin. And fun little tidbit: it is a term that I believe in Mexico is actually often used derogatorily. Like its origins is a derogatory term, but it's among the set of terms that people have reclaimed. And so thinking about like 70s, like not even wave feminisms, but different feminisms of color from women of color. So Black Combahee River Collective, thinking about like I think it was American Indian movements and Black Panthers, and a lot of those the smallest things would give away regional differences and reveal the tensions that would come up. Like the food served at a conference that some of the writers of the book and some of the people interviewed in the book talked about gave away so many different tensions between like how Texas viewed different things versus like if you talking to folks who are not necessarily relevant to this conversation, but if you're talking in the Latinx identity, like New Yorkers will have a very different approach to things because they have a different history and connection because of their relationship to the US. And then West Coast Californians, we also have a very strange, we have our own real weird sort of associations around a lot of different things because they're depending on even where you are in California, as much as it's referred to because of SoCal, due to like the like Latina influence in it. Like Central California is oof, and even some parts of Northern California are liberal oof, which is a very distinct kind of oof.
No, it's
But
very true. And like I kind of grew up until my like grade 10. I grew up in Southern California, kind of moving around Southern California from San Diego to like San Bernardino, Inland Empire area. And then for high school, my family moved to Northern California, just south of San Jose. And it was absolutely, I think, well, one of the things for sure was that it was definitely more segregated. And that surprised me how much more segregated the Bay Area and Northern California was. Um, and, you know, if you Google my high school, which I won't name here, like the thing that comes up is, you know, some racial bullshit, some white supremacist bullshit, about, you know, a thing that went all the way to the US or the state Supreme Court around whether or not kids could wear, had the, whether or not the administration of the high school could stop kids from wearing American flag t-shirts on Cinco de Mayo for the cause of public safety, because they weren't wearing it because they were proud to be American. They were wearing it to be fuckers. You know what I'm saying? And
as you
you
do.
know, I mean tracks. Uh, and so yeah, I'm with you. Okay. All of that aside, we've spent 13 minutes and I haven't even gotten to ask you my basic question. The
Yeah.
one like legacy piece that I need everybody to remember about the first 13 minutes is bully Angie into joining TikTok. Okay, moving along. Um, Angie, how did you become a nerd?
Jesus, I wish I had something much more complex, but I have to say a lot of it is my brother's influence. My brother, who is someone who I no longer talk to for a lot of admittedly transphobic reasons because of him and my sister-in-law, he was a lot of my early exposure to different kinds of nerddom and different kinds of music, to be honest. Like full disclosure, as relatively chill and relaxed as I try and be around most tables and be like grounded and such. I grew up as a thrash metal fan because of my brother. Like Anthrax, Megadeth, Slayer, and Metallica were like big things that he listened to because my brother's favorite band was Metallica, and then Pantera, Sepultura, and a bunch of other bands that primarily came from the larger category of heavy metal. That was a lot of my initial influences musically. And also, my brother was a Resident Evil series fan. We grew up with playing fighting games with Marvel vs. Capcom. We grew up with, he liked X-Men comics and he was a Batman fan and also a fan of the X-Men, so the big two. But also, like, he very specifically, I think, even changed his middle name to be Magnus after Magneto because he loves that character so much. I mean, he also changed his last name to carry on my grandfather's legacy. So he did make a sensible decision in some sense, but Magnus was the name that he carried on. Like, that was the kind of nerd that my brother is, not even was, is. And he was the kind of first influence on me for, like, I love video games. I love what you can do with the medium of video games. And specifically because I process most of the world primarily through sound, a lot of what stuck out to me in those early years was video game soundtracks. Like, really, my nerddom, whether it's from music theory interest that I've studied into jazz, rock, and blues, whether it's thinking about food and other things, they come from those early days, really, of playing games like Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, like early platformer stuff for like the PlayStation, because we were a PlayStation and Nintendo household. Never understood why people fought about console wars stuff. I never got those concepts. Very strange to me. But I primarily got into nerddom because of my brother and kind of my mom. My mom was like esoteric philosophy nerd. Like, she was the kind of person who she got excited in high school when we had to read No Exit as a required like play. She was the kind of person who was recommending texts by Friedrich Nietzsche to read. She was that kind of person because she was also often admittedly very depressed and anxious person, which I come by naturally from her as well. But a lot of nerddom just came from family influences, I'd say.
And you talked about lots of different types. I think that you're one of the first people who's really clearly drawn that line that when I ask the question, like, how did you become a nerd? A lot of people go to like, oh, I was a fantasy book reader. I was a sci-fi book reader. I played video games. Or I was really into comics. But I don't necessarily mean pop culture definition of nerd. You can be a nerd about anything. People who go to Buffalo in February to go to the Super Bowl and go shirtless painted in team colors, they are nerds. You know what I'm saying? Like, for sure they're sports nerds, but they're nerds at
They
the
are
core,
nerds.
you know? Um, so you come by it pretty early. And you said a lot of amazing games that we definitely have in common, although you're a baby compared to me. So I was probably teaching my siblings how to play those games as you were just discovering them. Um, but Spyro for sure. Did you ever play Earthworm Jim? That was,
Yes,
oh,
yes, I did. I loved the goofiness of that kind of art style, and it's the kind of thing that here's my thing with why I like some of the things that I do and why like the most up-to-date graphics in games or in like approaches to things, and this kind of oddly overlaps with my views around like AI stuff with homogenization of art and creativity, is that style lasts. It has staying power. Hyper realism and all of those sorts of things of like, oh look, this like we can see the faces and everything like so well. The hair is so finely like detailed and everything. That's really cool. I like seeing those kinds of things in different mediums around video games because I like seeing what people do with that. However, I also point to a video game magazine example where if you look at GoldenEye for Nintendo 64, which was a huge multiplayer game for in my household, like my cousins and I played so much of that game. Fuck Time Mines, by the way. Uh, we played so much of that game, and at one point, the fact that you could see the actors like faces on the models, that was seen as revolutionary. Like that was like, oh my god, we can actually see the faces. And now we look back on it, it's like they look so very dated and blocky. But that's the kind of thing is that then I look at something like Earthworm Jim or another even in a mainline series like Zelda, if I look at Wind Waker, Wind Waker is a game where when they did the remaster, I remember it was like I think a YouTube channel of a random guy who does video game content called Rabid Luigi, where his first reaction to replaying the remaster was he nearly screamed and reached like a pitch that only dogs can hear because he was like, it's so pretty. Like he had the enthusiasm of a little kid. That stuff stays. Earthworm Jim, weird cell animation stuff, the kinds of ways that folks approach art where they're like, hell, even Symphony of the Night from Castlevania series. That game is like 20 years old, 24 years old, somewhere around there. It's a good amount of age. It still looks beautiful. The background art, it's amazing. The way your main character moves through and has these after images behind them, it looks great.
there
Style
is
lasts.
being that I know that you and I also share love for cozy games. I will not paid to shout this out, but there is a game. Everybody go Google it. They're just going into beta right now. It's called Palia, Palia, and it is like Minecraft and Farmville and Final Fantasy mixed together. So the purpose isn't necessary. I don't even know that there's combat mechanics. I think it's build a community, build a village. Somebody becomes the wood chopper, somebody becomes the farmer, somebody becomes the miner. Like it it looks really, really good. I just got my beta invitation. I'm super, super stoked for that one. Symphony of the Night, agree, masterpiece. Chat is agreeing with you. Talia, that's the one. GoldenEye, listen, was the cause of so many fights. GoldenEye,
Yes.
we had it. I mean, obviously, I had it for the N64, but later I got it for the GameCube. They reissued it on disc for the GameCube. And on the GameCube, you could have 8 controllers. That became, as we were like adults at that point, like 20, I married my partner when I was 21, and I think until I was like 25 or 26, almost every Friday night you could find people at my house playing, a group of people that we had gathered together. We would have a potluck every Friday night, and we would play either GoldenEye or Mario Kart for GameCube, like the original
Oh
Rainbow
God.
Road.
Yeah, yeah. The place in which everyone was trying every single run to figure out the correct shortcut. So many deaths, so many falls, because no one could ever get it right. And then the one person who got it right got to gloat over everybody because they're like, haha, it's so easy to do. And all of us are looking at them like, you are lying through your teeth.
Honestly, and we at the time didn't have a TV because evangelical Christian, but we did have a projector for our business. And so we would project it on the wall, and everybody's screen was essentially what was the size of like regular TV screens at that time. And when you won and like the trophy popped up, we would make you go stand against the wall and take pictures on our probably Palm Tungsten. The iPhone wasn't out yet. Or like digital camera, like maybe it was an actual digital camera. Yes, it was so good. We did own Smash Brothers, but I refused to play because my partner chooses Pikachu and then just button smashes to obliterate everyone else. And my autism, I could have, the number of times I should have known I was autistic before I got diagnosed at 40, significantly, significantly, was Smash probably could have made that diagnosis. You know what I'm saying?
Look.
His way
I'm a
of
gal.
playing was wrong. His
Yes, I
fun was
agree.
wrong.
I agree. I had the same exact thing with fighting games from Marvel vs. Capcom, except my version of it was that my brother is not allowed to pick Strider in the original Marvel vs. Capcom. He's not allowed to play Strider Hear You ever, because the only time he would play that is when he wanted to make sure he would win, because he knew I couldn't beat that character when he used them, because he knew how to use them well, and I was just mad every single time. Just like, why are you doing this? Are you afraid I'm gonna beat you? Also, to be fair, he may also have had bitterness over the fact that despite having many more years of gaming on me, he could never do any sort of jumping sections in games. He would go at stuff for like 30 minutes and he'd be like, Ange, can you come do this for me? And I'd be like, okay, how do you jump? And he'd be like, this is how you jump. I still remember this playing Metroid Prime with him one time. He was stuck on a spot. It just requires timed jumps, but he was just really bad at it. Then he was like, can you come do this for me? And I was like, okay, I don't know what the controls are. He's like, you do press this to jump. And I was like, oh, okay. Jump, 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 jump. Did it in like 4 tries. And he's just like, okay, thank you. Slowly moves me away.
I feel that in big sibling soul to the core of my being. Stephen, on the off chance that you watch this, buddy, there is some fracture in our relationship that will never be repaired based on how many times I struggled to not rage quit through something, and you would walk in and sit down and like boop 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 boop, and be done. Listen, yeah, that's a deeply imprinted stain on every sibling pair that grew up in the 90s for sure.
Yep.
We are halfway through, and I've only asked you one question.
This is par for the course for us, so let's get
This is
into the
very par
question.
for the. Ooh, don't tell on me in front. What did
For us, not
you once said something to Ava, and I have died laughing over it ever since. I have it like saved as a GIF on my computer. It was like, "Don't embarrass me in front of company." Yeah. Okay. Let me ask another
questions.
question.
Okay.
You at some point make the leap from comics and video games into TTRPG. What does that look like?
So my initial experience with TTRPGs was actually extremely negative, I will say. That my first experience was playing, I think it was like a Star Wars RPG of some kind. Like I had best friends from high school. Now, for those of you who want the lore about Angela, the lore is that whenever I mention my best friends from high school, know it's about to be some bullshit. Not like hijinks or fun things, just they're terrible people. They specifically statted me in terms of my gear for the game poorly, in that like they gave me gear that was like, oh, unless you roll like an 18 or above, there's no way you can do like good damage. You're just doing like consistent below damage. And one of them was like, yeah, I wanted to be a bounty hunter, and like they had more familiarity with the game, and I was like, oh, okay, sure. And I got to enjoy a small dose of Schadenfreude, because the first roll I made in that game when we actually got into a fight in there against, I think it was like Droidekas, I crit, and I did absurd amounts of damage because it's specifically designed to fight Droideka only on a crit. So I was happy, and the dude who became the bounty hunter crit failed, and his rocket booster thing that he had on his back launched him into the ceiling, and he crashed on the floor. But that was kind of my first experience with TTRPGs, and I was like, I like this, but it was one of those weird things where TTRPGs, I only ever associated it with things like D&D, and that was a realm that I didn't want to go into, because for whatever reason in my head I was just like, I'm a nerd, or I'm not popular, and I'm a nerd, and I'm probably don't actually have that many friends, but I'm not that kind of nerd. There's a
The
weird stigma
hierarchy.
around it.
The
Yeah, there's a
hierarchy of
weird
nerds.
hierarchy about nerddom. Like philosophy nerds its own tier, because fuckers in that discipline fight over each other. I dislike most of the people who I've worked with in that discipline, aside from like my advisor, and that's because he was like 30 years older than me and just really chill about everything. But my first experience with TTRPGs was really negative until it got back into, and this is something I will fully attribute to my partner Moss, who is also a game designer now, who created a world to run 5e D&D in for us that was called, I think it was Meteor World, where the idea is that the world had gone through natural disasters that were prompted by meteor crashes, but different places had adapted to create safe havens. So, for example, I think some woods had actually grown flowers with coverings and leaves that were big enough to actually cover and protect the forest from impacts of meteors. That was my first experience going into that, and I was like, I have no idea how any of this works, but this is really cool, because this was a part of fantasy that I really liked. Because when I grew up, I initially didn't like the associations I had in the general, I will use this dreaded word, even though I know it's very loaded, discourse around things like Lord of the Rings, and that being the defining like Western like canon. When it didn't work for me in the way that like I was used to, because I just wasn't great with visuals, and often the books had so many like long passages just describing so many different beautiful places, but that didn't work for me, because for me I needed sound, I needed food, I needed a lot of other things, which looking back on it, there were those descriptions, but the sense of how people talked about it was like grand adventures, the different themes, but a very homogenized, even frankly whitened, and even like almost patriarchal at times understanding of the series. And it has its faults. It legitimately does. But those were, but going with my partner into this world with a couple of friends from college, that was sort of one of the first exposures that wasn't a one-off, because I think I just remember Dream Askew by Avery Alder was also a game that I played in college for a one shot for 4.5 hours that I absolutely loved, that Moss, my partner, ran. Because that one is like kind of zombie apocalypse, but imagine like psychic maelstrom has wiped out people instead of like zombie virus. And I've always liked apocalyptic literature because I like imagining, because while it's the most despairing point in a lot of depictions of humanity, I've always, as a creative, really liked bittersweet perspectives on the world, because for me the hardest points in our life, you either succumb to despair or you find something to hold on to, and those, a lot of that literature, written well, knows how to approach, okay, the world has ended, so what do we hope for, how do we build, all of that stuff. My partner pushing into D&D and them not being super excited to keep doing it, stressed out by it, whereas I was like literally looking for different resources to port over in my own database, thing that I found, to just start like homebrewing classes immediately, creating. I think at one point I made a character for every single mainline class in D&D 5e with their own distinct story.
Yes, I too
I
am
love that
autistic.
component.
Mhm.
Shut up. Yes.
Along the lines of how should we have known before
How
we
should we have
knew?
known?
Yes, I
That
too have a
one.
D&D Beyond account with unlimited character creation. I have the Star Wars game that you first played. I guarantee you, it's a D20 Star Wars game. It's on my shelf. This one.
Oh my god, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tried to convince my then boyfriend. It's a very small shelf, Mo. It's not like the rest of you. I have a very, very small few things. But this predates my relationship with my partner, and I married him at 21. I married them at 21. I bought this when I was with my then boyfriend, and I was trying to. It was like my second foray into TTRPG. I played D&D with some friends from high school who were very well-meaning but math nerds, and they were playing 3.5 and were very much about the min-maxing, and any characterization, any role play that they were doing at the time was very much about alignment. The role play was just to prove that you
Mhm.
were following the alignment of your character, right?
Right, right.
I was a theater nerd, so that did not go well for me. I was like, I want to heal people, I guess I want to help. And they were like, Paladin. And then I would try to do what I thought was interesting things. And they'd be like, no, that's not your alignment. And I did not appreciate the experience because it wasn't a table that I was going to thrive at. Which brings us to a GRTW and Community Cleric Standard. Don't settle for anything less than a table you love. Truly, even if you're just like, yeah, that table's fine, go find a table you love. There's so many tables. Go find a table you love. Okay. Um, I don't hate alignment now. I understand the way that it can help to guide play, especially for new players. It can really help them to start to think through and process what would my character do, and I can't just do anything. That's how you end up with murder hobo campaigns. Like, where would this be and what are the consequences if I change out of this? Like, there is a purpose for it, like everything, but as a DM you can also throw it out once it's not serving its purpose. But anyway, I went to go try to convince my boyfriend, and it was, satanic panic, and his parents wouldn't let him play D&D, but Star Wars was totally okay. So I went to like the Barnes and Noble, and they had the Star Wars kit. So I have the first two books, the role-playing game, The Power of the Jedi source book. It came with maps. It came with pewter minis at the time. Oh, how far we've fallen that our starter kits don't come with anything anymore. Pewter minis, dice, a full 7 set dice, and like also paper tokens for different things, and starting adventure guide and pre-generated color glossy double-sided character sheets. Like it was a plus, friends. It was a good starter kit. And I've kept it ever since. So I love that we have that connection too. Um, but I'm sorry that your friends were dicks. That is too often a story that I hear on Community Cleric. It's it's something that we hear a lot, and it's something that I think you and I both having that experience is something we've worked really hard to. When we have newbies to TTRPG here at GRTW, we work really hard to like guide them out of those experiences and to show them what a positive experience is, that they don't have it.
Yep.
So they don't have to settle for it anywhere else, I think is important. Um, so you make your way into TTRPG and that was at high school. How did things change for you? You went away to college, right? Like you went away to college. What was
Well,
that
it was
experience? How did that
away
change
as
things for you?
relatively speaking. It was like 20 minutes away, but it was enough distance where it was like I wasn't living at home. I was away from family enough to where it was. I think I th- I think the transition into college was very much. It is cliche to say this, but there was a lot of things where I had to actually figure out like who I was in an unregulated place because again, also another thing that should have clued me in on the autism, but didn't until way later, was this sense of like part of the reason that I liked high school is that there was sets of terms, regulations, and rules you could follow that would prompt success. And the people who didn't do them, therefore, wouldn't succeed. And that was just it. Now, mind you, I had the fortune because of just being a giant like academic like success and nerd because I think I got salutarian when I graduated high school or something. I think I tied with the dude. They gave it to him because I think they liked him as the poster person more. I'm sure there was racism. I pass over that now solely because it's too far away for me to really care at this point. That person was a jerk, and I already knew dirt on him anyway, so I didn't care about him winning. I knew I was a better person. Anyways, you can quote me on that. Uh, there was a lot about going to college that changed perspectives I had, and fundamentally, what I think it did for me in terms of creative work is that it just made me ask a bunch of different questions. And that sounds so trite, I think, at times, but for me, I promise this slight detour will make sense in the context of this larger question. For me, when I think about the discipline of philosophy and a lot of how people talk about creative works, they treat it as very frivolous. They treat it as though to ask certain questions is to entertain more a flight of fancy rather than like a serious thought. But with the academic work that I was studying, people could go to the most inane kind of question that you get typically and stereotypically associated with something like philosophy. That's like, what is the meaning of life? And I would be the kind of person who would be like, I want to take it seriously. Where it's like, okay, what do you mean when you talk about meaning? Is that an individual thing? Is it a contrived? Is it derived from interactions between people? If it's a sense of being able to find a reason for why you're doing things every day, how do we do that? And those kinds of questions are often what prompt the little kinds of experiments, ventures, and little leaps into the creative unknown. We make worlds to often tell the stories and speak the words we haven't been able to before, or even just to speak the words that we feel have not been spoken. And I remember what was it? This interview from Michael Stipe on I think it was VH1. I can't remember exact spot, but it was I think channel, but it was like VH1, like 80s or 90s. Michael Stipe, lead singer for REM, where he talked about this idea of when you wrote "Everybody Hurts," which is feels like such a cliche song now, but the lyrics for him when he was writing it, he said, "I thought I was pretty much the only person who was experiencing this feeling. It felt like such a personal song." And then I realized that other people felt that. And that's often what we're doing working as creatives, whether it's in writing, whether it's in music, whether it's in visual arts, whether it's in graphic design, whether it's in any number of mediums that really folks don't realize the labor and the creativity that goes into it. We're asking questions. We're thinking about the stuff that's latched onto us, that's gone deep into the skin and bone of us, and just asking what happens when you poke and prod there. That's honestly what a lot of college did for me in the general creative sense, and also for TTRPGs moving away from that in post grad life, which was my first year out of it, very difficult. I was effectively homeless for. I didn't have to ever be on the streets, but when I went to go register for SNAP, I could be legally considered homeless because I was part of that quiet homeless population folks did not talk about for a lot of like college grads who were couch surfing a lot. Couch surfing very frequently actually can put you under qualification for homelessness. And all of those things, all of those experiences, they shaped a lot of the worlds that I build even now. Like I would walk around a portion of like I think Hollywood area to get food, to literally go to a Starbucks to use the Wi-Fi for free. Didn't wasn't free because I felt guilty using it for free, so I would always buy something, a snack that was way too sweet and hurt, but I didn't feel guilty about using the Wi-Fi then. And see how people looked at homeless folk, see how people talked about or just passed over them. And that's sort of influence and experience in my life and all the other things that I've frankly been exposed to, it's had a profound impact on how I think about even the worlds I build. It's most of the time why there are often no cops. Healthcare is often already a standard of accepted everywhere, and homelessness is not really a thing in any of those worlds. And if it's
It's
dangerous, it's playing to genre, not because it's a world that wants cruelty for cruelty's sake.
it is it never fails to surprise me. I think if you're not American, it is really hard for you to understand how indoctrinated being American is. And I think particularly as a white American, it is such a fundamental part of. I have lived in Canada longer than I lived in the US at this point in my life. I have permanent residency, not a citizenship yet, but I have permanent residency. I own a home here. My degree is Canadian. All of my work history as an adult has been Canadian. My partner is Canadian. My kid is Canadian. When you said healthcare is an established right, it never fails to surprise me how I go, wait, say that like I think of myself as an American, but also I have healthcare and how far I'm struggling to express how dissonant how I view myself, how ingrained that idea that I'm American is, but also how dissonant it is from the values that I hold now about humanity and the value of a single human life and the value of collective humanity, which are undoubtedly impressed upon me because of who I have become as a Canadian, because they are not inbuilt to, definitely not to white America for sure. So those moments of cognitive dissonance of like, right, yeah, the America, and certainly the America of 20 years ago when I lived there, is not the America of today, in a lot of ways. It feels like we're back to some of the shit that was before, and it feels like there's new depths, but also there's some new hope. I don't know. I don't want to get onto that topic. I because I want to celebrate you. And that is a whole different show. I feel like we could do a whole panel on how fucked America is right now. Right? Fuck turfs, protect trans kids. Let's do a round of fuck turfs in the chat, please. There it goes. It's kicking off. Love to see it. Okay. I want to know, how does you understand TTRPGs, then you get into APs, how does your transition into actual play and or your transition into writing TTRPGs, because now you are the creative director of Girls Write These Worlds. You are, you know, and you were published before. You were part of creative efforts before. Do those happen at the same time? Do those, like what's the overlay there?
So, writing has been a consistent thing for me since I was actually about 14. I was very lucky in that uh, I had an honors English teacher who I shared like a bit of poetry. I think it was either for an assignment or just something that I'd written when I was more frequently writing stuff for DeviantArt. For those who remember that website from fucking ages ago,
Wait, that
I never
website
go.
still exists.
No, no, no,
Thank
it
you.
still exists, but just the level of, like, it being part of my social milieu, it's almost, like, 16 years ago at this point. It feels so distant from who I am and what feels like the everydayness of my world. Not that it's gone, it's still there. I still go every now and then to see my old work. I don't cringe at it, actually, which is probably a healthy thing, but a lot of what writing has been for me was often to deal with the difficulties that I had in my life, to process things, whether it came to sexuality, to mental health, to relationships and partners, through hope and views around hope and justice in the world, and also around God and losing family. And the move from doing that as a hobby to having it be my work was just mainly because I needed to make money. I needed to make use of my talents as best I could. But there's there's honestly like the move into APs was just a matter of what was already happening in the home games that I was running. I had for 2.5 years level 1 to 20 group for 5e in the first world that I ever built. I ran it for 6 players. Never again. Balancing is hard, especially when you just start having to import video game monsters like I did to make it even remotely challenging. You try fighting a Circle of the Moon druid, an ancient paladin, a nature
Listen,
cleric, and a
here
monk.
here is my rule. I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. Combat is over when combat ceases to be fun. They kill
Yes.
the dragon in 2 rounds. Oh, dragon had more hit points. You didn't know that. Combat is over when combat ceases to be fun for me because D&D combat is one of my favorite things. And if you are of the opinion that D&D combat sucks, I grant you that for a lot of people it does. I would encourage you to come to my Dovda is in the chat. D8 is doing a charity drive at the end of the month, and we will be doing
Ah, yes.
some D&D combat, and I promise you it doesn't have to suck. But anyway, go ahead.
But
Yes, balancing sucks. I agree with you on that.
so I was already creating stuff on my own anyways. Like it's one of those things where I would say if there's a takeaway from this segment of my answers and such is that there is no big leap all of a sudden between like I am just someone who plays this game to I am a designer or I am a writer. Now that's not to undervalue how much work and time and labor goes into doing things like homebrew for 5e or coming up with like alterations to a Thirsty Sword Lesbians book, or looking at Quest RPG and wanting a little bit more crunch and implementing some rules for that. All of that is labor. It is labor you are doing often for hobby, and you don't need to monetize it. That's not the takeaway I want to give here. If you can, great, but that's not the real point of it. My point is that you are doing work. You are doing creative work. And for me, literally the first 5e game I was in with my partner, I was already trying to do a multi-class of Bard and Warlock, and I went to a 4th edition uh, lineage of Shardmine because the lore behind them was fascinating to me. And I came up with a whole backstory of my wandering bard who lived in a commune of various kinds of found family, grabbed a hold of a songbook passed down for generations and an imprint of a shard mind that held the memories of her previous ancestor imprinted on her, and it created a very like intimate relationship between the two of them. Like all of that work was already stuff I was like, man, I want to share this, or oh god, I want to like try and tell these stories. I started out in a now defunct channel mainly because the head of it was terrible, but on Scraticus Academy, and then I just started moving more and more into other things. A lot of what really pushed me to want to be a part of like actual plays was just the fact that I never really got to be involved in like drama department growing up. I wanted to be the kind of person who I knew I could be creatively and dramatically, but the joke I make about myself is that I'm very quiet when I talk most of the time, and I'm not a loud person unless it's regards to singing. Singing, I am incredibly loud. I've sung like out loud in the middle of like airports, and my mom growing up had to tell me to quiet down because people were staring. Like I was that kind of person. And that's the same kind of person I've tried to be in actual plays because that's the person who I wanted to find. I wanted to be more of. I wanted to be more confident. I wanted to be anxious and exploring different elements of my sexuality and gender. I wanted to find the human of myself in the inhumanity of other characters because I think half the reason there's the trope of like every queer person discovers they're queer playing a tiefling is because there's a distance between our humanity or the kind of inhumanity we feel like embodies that ourselves embody in the quote unquote monstrous, that once we get to take distance away from ourselves and look at it, it doesn't look terrible. It's one, not inhuman to be. There's nothing inhuman about being monstrous, and also being monstrous isn't terrible. There's so much embedded even within those like representations that I just really wanted to tell stories because I had worlds in my head that I wanted to share. I wanted to be a different person for a bit, and part of my growth as a performer and joy in being in this space has ultimately been figuring out how to actually play myself more and more. I've
Well,
made more of my characters autistic as a
to
result. Also, that's your influence too. You get credit for that bit of them becoming more autistic openly.
openly, I think I didn't
Openly.
like grant you more autism powers. Like, let's be very clear about the limit of my power here. I was going to make a joke about, Mo earlier saying like the first step is admitting that you're into monsters. She used different language that I won't use. But there's a graphic if anybody needs it. I created a graphic for it. But we are running out of time. I have 7 minutes left because time
Yes, do the
flies.
thing.
Okay. I have not, Jen put it into chat. Thanks, Jen. Jen's here for us. Angie. Can you please show us your dice? Because we cannot go through an episode without
Of
seeing
course.
dice.
So this is the heaviest and fanciest one that I happen to have that still registers on my camera and such. This is a heavy boy, and this is one of my favorites because despite not having been able to roll with it just yet, it's the feel of it in my hand is like it's like, oh, it has heft, it's got weight, it feels nice. This holder, this dice roller, is one that my friend actually put together for me and was very kind. And I'm going to move all of my dice in this box into this dice roller so I can show off my customized dice box that a pair of my players for my 2.5 long year campaign actually painted and made for me. Like this wasn't just a thing that they bought; they made this for me. This that it was designed to look like a book, so it'd be first volume because I think they were among the first folks to tell me I should try and write like a series set in here, and I even asked, I think at the time, permission for them to let me use the characters as part of the history. And it's one of my most cherished items that I own because it's a testament to the impact that my silly words have had on people, that they that I think one friend in that group came out as non-binary because of conversations with me and also explorations with talking about different elements with their character. there's such it's such a good example of folks understanding why I did the things that I did in making the world the way that I did.
I'm going to try to sneak one more question, but you're going to have to be brief, which
Yes.
I apologize because neither of us share that trait.
No.
Do you prefer to DM or do you prefer to play?
DM. Mainly because systems. I love learning systems.
Oh, we're the opposite. We're the same, and yet we're so different.
You hate systems. I know you hate learning systems. It's so much anxiety for you. And I'm just like, give me all of them. Let me spend 6 hours making a reference doc for this to make it easier for anyone who wants to try this to play. That's my favorite thing.
I cannot say that I agree. Okay. Arnica in chat says a top is a top is a top. Okay. Let me say
Okay.
this to wrap things up. It is a testament to Angela's quietness, as she called it, but also strength of being a unity point that I really wish, if nothing else, if people can't see the affection through our autistic ramblings at each other tonight, Angie's ability to be a unifying point is one of the things that I value the most about Angela as a human, as a council member, as a member of my found family. And so I want to point that out to people. Angie, do you want to tell people where you can be found? You can do a very super quick wrap up. And then I want to show some merch that showed up to us today. And then we got to do a raid.
Phoenix24Femme. You can find me on a lot of places at that name, at that particular handle, whether it's on Instagram, it's on Twitter while it's still around. We're still worrying about whether it's going to last. And also my Patreon. There's a lot of things with my Patreon that slowed over time, but I believe at last count I have 260 poems on there. Half of which are available for just public viewing, and the other half are very private and patron exclusive. But I've written quite a lot over the past, I think it's now 6 years of writing through that. I have posts, I have monster creations on there. I have original song pieces that are on there that have only ever been seen by the people who either commissioned them or specifically asked to listen to them. There's a lot on there, but at Phoenix24Femme you can find pretty much all of my stuff is now associated with that handle because I've been trying to unify it under one thing to make it easier to find because my big sister has been aggressively poking me to do this as she has her right to do as my giant annoying sister.
Absolutely. Let me also, I can't let you go without having you send a hello to Moss for me. Moss is
Of course.
one of your partners and a truly amazing person who I have always appreciated whenever I get to see them and talk to them. So please send Moss my love. Please follow Angela on all of the things. We linked her beacon, so go and do that. We are going to do a raid. I struggle after Community Cleric. I really struggle to find something. Usually I like to do something that's a game that's run by a woman, and particularly if it's a BIPOC woman, and I found somebody, and only 4 or 5 people are watching them. They're kind of a newer channel, and so they're not a newer channel. They have a ton of followers, but they're around. So we're gonna go raid to Dice Dragon Guild in a second. But I wanted to show you guys this merch that just came in. We have, oh, come on. Oh, look at that. We have patches and they glow in the dark, people. You are going to be able to get them on our website very soon. And they are, not that it ever works, but they do technically have iron on backs, but everybody who's ever had a patch knows that those things don't work. So we have patches. Girls Run These Worlds glow in the dark patches. We have a ton of other stuff too that'll be up on our store. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Angela, for being my guest. We didn't even get to remotely close to anything that all of the things that I wanted to talk about. But I adore you, and I cannot wait to meet you in person, um, because it's going to be one of those things that's just gonna it's just going to be easy. Like you just know, you just know. So thank you for being my guest here tonight. I adore you all. Angie, thank you. Everybody who's watching, we will see you real soon